Ever since the arrival of Minecraft, the open-world survival game has grown immensely, with a few of those games trickling over the consoles. The newest one happens to be 7 Days to Die, a post-apocalyptic zombie survival game where your goal is to do just that, survive. But does 7 Days to Die have enough in it to survive the test of time, or should it just be fed to the zombie horde? Seven Days to Die was released back in 2013 on Steam as an early access title that's been steadily getting upgrades ever since, and has officially not been moved out of early access on the PC version, but has now been brought over to home consoles. The game presents you with one of 3 different modes for you to jump into: the single-player survival, multiplayer survival, or the creative modes. In single-player survival, you're dropped into the world and your goal is just to survive by yourself. No other players are going to be able to join you via online, but the game does present you with split-screen multiplayer, which is definitely one of this game's biggest assets. Multiplayer survival has you jumping online, either with a private server with friends, or with an open server where anyone else can actually join your game at any point. This is a much more competitive and enjoyable experience, as you will have to do PvP against other players to try to protect not only your base, but the supplies that you've been able to gather in the world. Then there's creative, where you don't have to worry about being killed by the zombie horde. Your goal is just to build up and create anything that you want it to. Create the absolute perfect fortress to protect yourself. Even though you won't be able to die in it, it gives you a great way to mess around, find the supplies, and build exactly what you want before you actually can jump back into survival mode and take those newly learned skills, or you can just have fun and mess around in a sandbox for as long as you want to. No matter what mode you end up jumping into, you'll get a basic tutorial to kind of help you out, though unfortunately it's not very well done at all, and there's a lot of stuff not only missing from the tutorial that would really come in handy to know early on, as well as they don't give you the button presses that you need to. You kind of just have to fumble around and figure out which buttons end up doing which. It took me a few minutes just to figure out how to upgrade a wooden frame, aka building it up instead of accidentally destroying it. These key things of not having enough of the tutorials or options for tutorials, as well as not giving you the button presses, just left me feeling lost when I first started the game up. One of my biggest issues with 7 Days to Die right from the beginning, one of my biggest issues besides the tutorial was also just the overall interface. It's extremely clunky to move items around. I'm sure on PC using a mouse to move quickly and drag and drop items to where they need to go, I'm sure works fantastically. But on console, just using the joysticks, it feels lacking and very, very slow when it comes to trying to maneuver items. And since the game is always playing and enemies could swarm and attack you at any moment, it's key to get in and out of menus as fast as possible, and I felt like the menus and overall interface for the system just slowed me down way too much. If you're someone who loves crafting, which unfortunately I've never been the biggest fan of, you're gonna love what 7 Days to Die has to offer, as there is a ton of various different items for you to craft and find supplies for. Not only can you build up buildings, there's a lot of different weapons, a lot of different clothing items, as well as food and other things to maintain. One of the things I love is the overextensive skill system in the game. Jumping into the skills menu can be almost overwhelming with the total amount of skills that you can actually level up and improve for your character. The game's map that you jump into, which can be actually randomly generated, or you can go with the default map, has a lot to offer just as far as landscape goes. You have deserts, forests, and snowy mountains, big water areas for you to traverse and dive into. You have to manage things such as body heat, where you can get hypothermia or heat stroke quite easily. In fact, it was a little jarring just how quickly those things ended up happening. And you have to worry about what clothes you are wearing, or which ones you should take off to try to cool yourself off a little bit. Drinking water or using water to put yourself out when you catch on fire, or if you're just burning up with temperature, are some really cool elements that add that whole survival feel to the game. And while you are given no direction, there are some side quests for you to tackle. You'll get notes that you'll be able to find, and they'll give you little things like kill a certain number of this, or kill a certain number of that, or craft this, or craft that. But overall, for the most part, you're just finding stuff to build up your particular fortress. The reason why the game is called 7 Days to Die, though, is because of the elusive Day 7. Once you reach it, you're going to be swarmed automatically with a giant, massive horde of zombies. And your goal is really to build up enough defenses and have enough weaponry at your disposal so that you'll be able to take on that zombie horde once it ends up showing up. And even after you're able to clear out that zombie horde, 7 days later, there's going to be another set. This is an endless game that you're just going to see how long you can possibly survive in the world. So you'll have to deal with those zombie hordes every 7 days. So make sure that you're prepared and ready to build up a pretty extensive defense system so that you can possibly survive. However, honestly, you're not penalized if you're unable to survive. If you die, you do end up losing a bit of your overall stamina and health, which is definitely going to come into play later on. As soon as you're able to build up that health and stamina, if you end up dying and lose 10 points off your total health bar, it can be pretty devastating. But at the same time, you're really only losing all the items you currently have on. And as long as you're building a spawn point near where you end up building your fort, you should be able to quickly get back there and grab the supplies from the backpack that ends up dropping once you ended up getting killed. You can go right to that backpack and search it and pick up everything that you currently had on you. As well as there is also crates for you to store items in so that you don't end up not only having too much on you, but if you end up dying, you can go right back to that crate and pick up some backup supplies so you can actually go and grab the supplies you may have lost in that previous life. Now that mostly applies to the single player because in the multiplayer, you can end up having your stuff stolen. If someone ends up finding you and kills you, since it is PvP, they can end up taking your stuff or taking over your fort overall. You can put tons of time into something and then a whole other group can move in and end up taking you out. One of the things I did also like about the game was just the amount of options you end up having before you jump into a world. Having that ability to pick a randomly generated or the default map, difficulty options, choosing the AI for the zombies, even though honestly the AI as a whole for the zombies and other animals that are throughout the world is really, really poor at best. Still, there are some options to make things a little bit easier or a bit more difficult for you, and you can actually select what kind of difficulty you want before jumping into a multiplayer matchup. Being an early access title still on Steam and being ported over the console before going out of early access worried me immensely before picking up the game, and unfortunately those worries were met. I'm not sure how this compares to the PC version as I have not played it, but the PS4 version is not only clunky, it doesn't work very well at all. The game is constantly stuttering with big frame rate drops during more intense moments, and the game just overall freezing every few seconds just for a second or two, which ended up becoming jarring and annoying very, very quickly. The game as a whole looks really poor with some terrible character designs and overall textures for the map. Everything is clipping into one another. The very opening shack that I ended up finding has trees growing all through the actual walls, and not in a very cool post-apocalyptic where the trees have kind of grown around the house and building. No, just glitched and sticking through. Items would end up being halfway in the ground or upside down or floating in midair constantly. Also, the animal AI and animations are atrocious. The deer running animation made me pause the game and laugh for a few minutes, and just took me completely out of any horror aspect I had while playing through the game. I had animals get stuck in rocks or in trees. In fact, I came across a rabbit at one point that just was jumping up and down within a tree and was unable to move. Overall, these things may have been acceptable or are acceptable in an early access Steam game, but once the game is now on consoles for a full price release, honestly, it's just not acceptable. And then when it comes to the multiplayer, I ran into a ton of more issues with the game. Connection-wise, it just could not stay connected for the most part. Finally, I was able to get on a server where I was able to play for an extended amount of time without the game kicking me out, but overall, I just constantly ended up running into server disconnects. Every time I would have to find a new server, I would end up having to restart the tutorial. Sometimes I wouldn't even find another player in the world to do anything with or be killed by before I ended up getting a disconnect. And then it froze on me and crashed on me on several occasions. Did the game not only fully crash, but also just flat out locked up. My controller just stopped working and the system did not crash or lock up itself. I was still able to go to the PlayStation menu, but my character was stuck and was unable to move in any direction, but the world kept on going. So eventually zombies ran up and killed me, and even after I respawned, I was unable to move. One time this never stopped until I actually booted out of the game, and another time it ended up crashing on me eventually so that I could restart the game and go back in that way. Just stuff like that just really ended up putting a damper on any kind of joy that I was actually having with the game. I will be the first to admit, though, I'm not the biggest fan of a game like this. Surviving and crafting is definitely not my thing. But the reasons why I don't like this game are not because of that. I gave this game as much of a chance as I could, but technical issues, really messed up animations, and AI threw me out of any enjoyment that I ended up starting to have with 7 Days to Die. The game's box does not mention at all that the game is still early access on PC, and I know they've done a lot of updates, so honestly they could probably take it out of that by now, but I still think that's something that should have been included here. I'm sure they will add patches and fix some of the issues that I had initially with this game down the road, but unfortunately my time with the game has already been damaged. 7 Days to Die is available on PC for $24.99 and available on console for $29.99. And you're paying more for what honestly is a very much inferior game than its PC counterpart, at least at this moment. If you're someone who really loves the survival crafting style of gameplay, you will probably like elements of 7 Days to Die, though I'm going to highly recommend you wait for it to go on sale or definitely get some patches before you decide to put your hard-earned money towards it. If you're a PC player of 7 Days to Die and you're thinking about maybe jumping over to the console, definitely reconsider and stick with the, I'm sure, superior PC release that has been gaining updates quite steadily since its initial launch. Overall, though, for my time spent with 7 Days to Die, I didn't really have a lot of fun, though I appreciate what the game was trying to do, and it's not the worst survival crafting game I've played. That is for sure, as there are so many worse ones to find available on the PC alone. But in the end, I'm going to be giving 7 Days to Die, the PS4 release, a 3 out of 10. But anyway, guys, that will wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.